Hey, I got some red painted seeds here. Let's take one of them and let's imagine that this is you. One red seed. And what I've got here is a jar of many other seeds. About how many would you suspect? 1 million. That's right, I counted out 1 million seeds by weight. And so what if I were to accidentally drop this one red seed, you, into this jar? And if I shook it up, where'd you go? There you are in a sea of 1 million others. You know what that makes you? It makes you 1 in 1 million. 1 part per million. Sometimes we call that 1 ppm. So this is what 1 million looks like. If you wanted $1 million, that's how many you'd need. What about 1 billion? 1 billion is 1,000 million. And so you'd need 1,000 of these jars. You know, that's enough to fill up like all the sands on this beach, around this campfire at least. Yeah, that's about 1 billion. What about 1 trillion? 1 trillion is 1 million million. That's like this whole stretch of beach. Could you imagine having that amount of money? You know, this is 1 million. There are more than 1 million humans on this planet. In fact, there are more than 1 billion humans on this planet. There are about 8 billion. In fact, over 8 billion. It was in, 2022 that the human population surpassed the 8 billion mark. Oh. And you're not just 1 in 1 million. Each of us is actually 1 in 8 billion. Wow. Kind of makes you feel insignificant, huh? But that's not to say we don't each have value. No. We each have value. What it's to say is that there are an awful lot of us who each have value, and that adds up. We could say power. We could call it power. Each of us has a little bit of power, but put us all together, that's a staggering amount of power for good things and bad things, like caring for each other and taking care of the planet, or bad things like hurting each other and the planet. And I know it's tempting to think that one person doesn't matter, but history shows us what happens when millions disengage from our shared responsibility. It's only 1 plastic bottle. It's only a few kilowatts of energy. Multiply that by 8 billion and the difference is planetary. Likewise, consider when someone says, my 1 vote doesn't really matter. Doesn't it? What we do, each of us as an individual, matters importantly, massively. We know this in our bones. Hey, human civilization has grown fast. Here's our population curve over time, and it's still climbing. Question, why now? Why not in the past, in the future? Why is it doing that now? Because about 400 years ago, we got serious about understanding how the physical world actually works. Astrology became astronomy. Alchemy became chemistry. Wishful thinking became careful experimentation. And we entered into the age of, you got it, modern science. Did you know many of the founders of the United States were scientists at heart? Weighing the evidence and asking the question of what would make for a more perfect union. And out of that spirit was born an entire new field called political science. And in the same spirit, we had medical science, which dropped child mortality down, and agricultural science, which transformed how we feed ourselves. Do you know, about a century ago, most fertilizer came from animal manure, and we were running out of animal manure until a scientist came along and realized how to create fertilizer out of thin air, literally out of thin air. And then transportation, electronics, computers, the golden era of seemingly limitless resources and human invention. Ooh, wow. And so the population boomed. And as with any population boom, the odds of being born went up. And so here we are. Pretty lucky, if you ask me, because the odds of not being born are way, way greater. Congratulations to all of us. We won the ultimate lottery. We were born. What we've been living through has a name: exponential growth. 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, 8 goes to 16, 16, 32, 32, 64, 128, 56. You know, each subsequent step isn't a little bit more, it's a lot more. It's a mathematical function that defies our short-term thinking brains. And for any species, when growth turns exponential, things stop being normal. They become unusual. They become downright weird. Now, for most of our history, to get from point A to point B, you walked. Well, today, plane crosses around the world in hours. Try explaining that to someone from 500 years ago, and they'd think you've lost your mind. Yeah, we drive superhighways with supercomputers in our pockets. On the scale of human history, that's not normal. That's weird. Every hallmark of modern life, highways, skyscrapers, mass agriculture, the internet, solar panels, medicine, all the things we take for granted. On the grand scale, just plain weird. I like to call this the time of the weird because honestly, that's what it is. We're living through a short stretch, where technology changes faster than people in our institutions can comfortably adapt. That's weird. Where biological evolution is no longer the main force shaping who we become. That's weird. Yeah, of course, there are upsides. Luxury was once reserved for kings, like toilet paper, now belong to everyone. Cool. But history, math, and science all agree periods of rapid acceleration are temporary, short-lived. One way or another, the time of the weird comes to an end. And sometimes that ending isn't so pretty. Everything comes crashing down. But I've got good news. There's an alternative to continued exponential growth. Biologists call this logistic growth. Birth rate slow as the population nears the carrying capacity of the environment. An era of stability arises and things get boring. Wouldn't that be great? I don't know about you, but in this time of the weird, for me, it's exhausting. People so squeezed for time, they've lost the patience for a good story that doesn't close in 30 seconds. Let me just say, if you're having trouble sleeping at night, just picture this logistic curve in your head. It's pretty good news. And it's not just wishful thinking. Demographers project it's exactly where we're heading. Wow. By 2100, the human population may level off around 10 to 11 billion. Maybe less because smartphones seem to be lowering birth rates all around the world. Why, I'm not sure, but it probably has to do, I bet, with something weird. Smartphones. Any smartphone users out there? Yeah, How could smartphones cause fewer babies? What do you think? But of course, even at today's 8+ billion, we're already straining the planet's carrying capacity, which means we each need to get far more efficient with the energy and materials we use. You already know this. I have no doubt. And I have no doubt that one day future generations will look back on us and they'll say, oh, that was the time of the weird. That was the time of the great shift. When CO2 levels skyrocketed, when microplastics reached every drop of seawater, when they invented the internet and then artificial intelligence, it was a time of great poverty and great extravagance, when people spent most of their energy chasing the latest thing and never noticed that maybe the most important question was simply, do I plant zucchini or summer squash? And that brings us to artificial intelligence. Many of us already use AI. Many use it for everyday, for work, for personal stuff, for therapy. And you can write an incredible novel with the AI. You can write the next hit song. Catch? So can anybody. Soon we'll have all these incredible novels, all these hit songs. They'll start to sound the same. But, not enough readers, not enough listeners. And this AI superpower effect I'm talking about seeps into nearly every career path you can name. Yeah, even truck drivers. If that's not a seismic shift of weird, what is? Maybe it's the final gasp. Ask a kid, hey kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? I don't know. Something? That's the world our high school and college graduates are walking into. My 2 cents, if you can grow up to be yourself, that's pretty awesome. Well, here's what I've learned in working with AI, and I suspect you learned it too. AI is an adult tool. It demands adult skills, judgment, discernment, critical thinking, the wisdom that comes from experience. AI isn't entertainment technology, it's cognitive technology. Think about that. It doesn't change how we play, it changes how we think. Ooh. It's like social media on mega steroids, and little wonder that most kids are first introduced to AI through social media, unknowingly, through algorithms already shaping how we think on the level of species. A student can now generate a polished essay in 30 seconds without grasping the argument, the evidence, or sometimes even the topic. And the danger isn't cheating. The danger is the illusion of competence. And down the road, something worse, the loss of real human expertise. There are no shortcuts to expertise. Expertise for humans comes from fighting the friction. You know that. And guess what AI removes? You know that answer too. I'm not saying AI is bad. I'm saying AI is an adult tool, and we adults need to teach our kids carefully and mindfully how to use it well and responsibly. Does that make sense? Which brings me to my favorite analogy, driver's ed. It's a good thing, right? We want our young adults to be able to drive responsibly. Now, doesn't that make sense? Yeah. Now, how many school districts actually train students in the use of AI? This study found that only about 1/3 of all districts offer any training at all. Yeah, I know. The teachers are just now learning about AI themselves. I get it. We all need to learn. But please, that includes our students. I'd say sooner than later. And this is where I take Act 1 and join it with Act 2, the time of the weird to the need for AI literacy. I say, don't blame the schools, don't blame the parents, don't blame the publishers, and certainly not the students. We are all doing our best in this time of the weird, a world that keeps jolting us from horses to cars, from computers to AI. Just as we get used to one paradigm, the rug gets pulled out from underneath us, and here comes another. So we each do what we can, each with an understanding that the actions we each take matter dearly. I'm only 1 in 8 billion. What could I possibly do? Everything, provided we act together. We each listen to that little voice that tells us, hey, pick up that plastic bottle, to cast that vote, to continue learning about the latest technology, to communicate deliberately and carefully your new understandings with each other. That's the spirit. Together. Because we also understand that the alternative path isn't that easy. You know, maybe one day our great-great-grandkids will look back in this era and say, that was the time of the weird. That was the time of the great shift. The moment humanity lifted its collective gaze from the ground to the heavens. The moment we realized technology was taking control of us and we flipped it. Instead of paradigms flipping us, we took hold of the technology. We took hold of the technology. Yeah. The moment we saw ourselves as a valuable keystone species with heavy but deeply rewarding responsibilities. The moment we became true stewards of this blue planet where we can sit down and enjoy zucchini or summer squash. Folks, this is a time to be planting seeds. And for this fireside chat, the seeds I'm talking about here are literacy. More specifically, AI literacy. What AI is, what AI isn't, and what role AI might actually play in bringing us to logistic growth. We've been tilling the garden. I think you'll want to check these out. Good generations to you.